Hello everybody, and welcome to a little video where we're gonna be introducing Skyforge. Like, what the heck is Skyforge? That I could talk about for hours, because this game has a lot of depth. It has a lot of stuff to it, but we are just going to give you a little bit of an introduction to each of like the major systems and how they all work together, and what this game is all about, because we are going to be doing guides for it, but I think just kind of getting people into the game is an important thing to do first. So, first off, there is a link in the description where you can go and download the game for free. It's a free-to-play game, and it's got a really fair business model, so you could just go download it and start playing it right now. But I think you should probably get introduced to a lot of the complicated systems first. Let's start with the story. The story is pretty cool. You learn really early in the game that you are an immortal, which is something in the game that, without spoiling any of the story, I'm going to try to avoid any of that, is someone who can't really die, but ends up becoming like a cosmic policeman. Like, the thing that comes to my head every time I think about the Immortals is it's like the Green Lantern Corps, right? Like, that's what it's like to me. You go around the planet and you're helping people, and you're saving things from pure destruction, basically. That's like the gist of it. You find out that you're immortal, but as you go throughout the story, it gets really good. It starts off kind of like, okay, I can see where they're going, but it actually does get really good. And the story itself has a bit of a twist that happens, and then you're investigating people, and it's really cool. I would suggest actually paying attention to it. First bit of it can be, like I said, a little bit, it's okay, but it gets really, really good. And in fact, the voice acting in the game isn't bad. Like, there's a lot of games that can come out and have really bad voice acting. This stuff isn't bad, and it does help drive the narrative. And that's really all that you want the voice acting for anyways. So, aside from the story, the game itself is an action MMO. It's action combat. The way I describe the combat to people is it's like a mix between DC Universe Online and WildStar, and those are two good games, combat-wise, to put together. It's got a combo system, so you could kind of see, like, when I'm fighting on my Slayer, that, like, I have a left-click attack and a right-click attack, and my camera is just locked to my mouse. So as long as I'm moving my mouse around, I'm moving, like, where I'm aiming, per se. And you can lock onto targets with, like, F and stuff. But you can attack with left click, and then there are right click attacks that are contextual with that, and that changes based on your class, and then you have activated abilities that you can use on the number keys, and it's really cool, and it's really quick, because you also have the dodge mechanic, so you're like dodging out of the way of stuff, and it's a lot of fun to play as you could see with my Slayer. The way that I like to think of it is it's like God of War in MMO style, right? Like, that's what the Slayer feels like to me, which is why I was drawn to that class. So let's actually talk about the classes now that we've covered a little bit of the combat. The classes themselves are interesting. You start with 3 classes, but there are like 12. So the 3 classes that you start with are the Paladin, the Lightbinder, and the Cryomancer. So that's like a tank, a healer, a support, and then like a mage DPS kind of thing. Now, those classes have their own, like, talent tree kind of thing. It's called an atlas, and it's a sphere grid. And as you put points into the sphere grid, you gain your abilities and your passive abilities, activated abilities. There's also just, points in between those abilities that are just giving you flat stat boosts, such as life or actual damage. So with that, you go throughout the tree, and you get to a certain point that unlocks a bigger atlas. Now, before that point, you're spending these things called sparks, and there's a red one, there's a green one, or I guess an orange. There's an orange one, a green one, and a blue one. That's simplifying the heck out of it for you guys, but anything you do in the game, you're not gaining experience, you're gaining these sparks, and then you spend these sparks, and we'll talk about how the quote-unquote experience system works. It's called prestige, but we'll get there. So you're spending these sparks on your class tree, your class atlas, and you're unlocking your abilities and your passive abilities and stuff. But then you reach a certain point in the tree where it no longer requires you to spend those sparks on your class tree. Instead, from then on, you unlock the bigger atlas, which we will show you and we'll talk about, and that's how you get the other classes. But for the rest of the class atlas, you are spending your class-specific sparks that you gain just by playing that class. So like, say I'm playing the Slayer, I'm unlocking Slayer sparks, which are like the sparks of stealth, and then I'm using those to unlock those abilities. So you could do the same thing with like the Lightbinder. As you're playing the Lightbinder or the Paladin, you get to a certain point where, as long as you're playing that class, you're unlocking sparks for that class tree, which means you can then spend the 3 other sparks, the orange, the green, and the blue ones, on the bigger atlas. Now, the big atlas is massive, and it leads you to a ton of things. It goes all the way to the other classes, such as the Gunner, or the Berserker, or the Knight, or the Necromancer, stuff like that. And you branch out from the first 3 classes that you start with. You can choose from whichever one, it doesn't really matter. And you can right-click on any one of those classes or specific spots in the big atlas, and you could say, show path, and it will give you an accurate path as the quickest way to get there. So that's, say you wanted to get to the Slayer, like I did right off the bat, because I was like, this class is amazing, then you can just right-click on it and say, show path. Speaking of those classes, by the way that you determine which one you would want to go for is early in the game, when you unlock the upper atlas, it allows you to go and try out those other classes in like a test facility. So you could try out the Gunner or the Berserker or the Kinetic, and you could try all these classes, and then you can determine which one that you like, and then you can go and get it on the major atlas. With that in mind, though, if you could switch classes at any time, right? If that wasn't apparent, you could switch classes at any time without any cost. And each of the classes have like their own kind of weapons that you have to collect, which I think is cool because it gives you, stuff to do for those other classes, aside from just filling out the class atlas. However, I would advise, finishing a class when you get the chance, because if you finish a class atlas tree, you gain a special passive ability that is really powerful that you can equip, it's really cool that they allow you to do that. So it gives you, it incentivizes you to fill out these classes and to master them and to get really good at them. So that way, when you get to the end game, of which there are raids and group content and stuff like that, in fact, there's like an invasion event going on as I make this video, then you could participate in that with any of the classes that you need to. So like if a group is looking for, I don't know, a Templar, then you could play, or not a Templar, but a Paladin, you could play the Paladin. If a group is looking for a Cryomancer, then maybe you could do that, because maybe you've filled out that class. So it's a really unique way of doing it, and I really like the fact that you could just change classes at any time, because it means that you can just, go out and do whatever you want in the game at that moment. You don't have to go make a new character. Speaking of which, you're only allowed 1 character. If you want a second character, you have to go make a new account. But I think that's okay, because once you've played about 5 hours of the game, you'll start realizing like, oh, there's no reason at all to have another character. Literally, you can go change your appearance at any time. You could change your sex of your characters, whether it's a male or female. Like, you could change anything. And it's worth it to only have 1 character, because you're investing all your time into that 1 account that unlocks everything eventually, which is pretty cool. So that's how like the classes work, the atlas works. There's a lot more depth there, which we'll go into when I eventually make guides for it. But I do need to move on, because there's other stuff in the game that creates more depth, such as there is a system called the order system. So you are this immortal, and you do have people who follow you, and some of them worship these immortals, some of them don't, but for the most part you have these followers, and it kind of turns into like this cool social game that you normally see like on like iPhone games or stuff like that, where you get these followers and then you could send them out on missions, and then they bring back stuff. They bring back resources, they bring back experience for them, and they level up and stuff, and it's really cool because you can expand your order and make it bigger and more powerful, and this all ties in to giving you more prestige. But the prestige system is a whole other beast entirely. Notice how I haven't said leveling up at all, right? You don't level up in this game. You just gain more prestige. Everything you do, whether you're filling out your class atlas, your upper atlas, the big one, and you're gaining all those like passive bonuses, and then you're unlocking the classes, or you're unlocking, very specific passive skills, or even, upgrading their like virtue area. Like there's a lot of depth in the big atlas. I won't go into it, but everything that you're putting points into and spending your sparks on, and every piece of gear you're equipping is giving you more prestige. You can kind of see prestige as like a level system, right? The higher prestige you are, technically the higher level you are, but that's not necessarily the way the system works. But that's a good way to equate it. So, you know, you'll start out with like 0 prestige, but as you gain more power and stuff, you'll gain more prestige. And people are running around with like 40,000 prestige, where I'm at like 10,000. I've put in a pretty good time into the game. But there's an easier way to gain prestige now than there was before. They added like a new catch-up system where new players or returning players can catch up to the people who've been playing for a really long time by using things called sparks of replication. So they're just like the other sparks, except it's like a usable item that goes into your inventory. You use it, and then you can see at any time on your valuables page how many sparks of replication you have. And what they do is they give you a 600% bonus on any sparks that you gain, and it consumes the sparks of replication. So, you know, say you gain, I don't know, 1 spark, and then you get 600% additional sparks off of that one. It's a big bonus. And in fact, in the little adventure, which we'll talk about in the background that I'm doing right now, at the end of it, I just get a massive ton of the blue sparks because I have a lot of sparks of replication that are helping that 600% out. So you can really gain a lot of these atlas points as quickly as possible now because you have these sparks of replication that are just propelling you forward with what you're doing. Speaking of the adventure in the background, you have like these minor dungeons that you can go into, which are really cool. They're little contained stories. Oftentimes they tie into the main story, which you will go through. Other times you'll get like side quests that you can go back to these places. In fact, these places scale as you go, so you can turn up the difficulty and increase the rewards you're getting. You could do it as a group. You could do it solo. It's scaling. When you go back and do it, if you're within the same realm of getting rewards for it, you'll also get gear from it that is of your equivalent prestige level, right? So it scales the rewards from it. It's really cool because some of these little adventures are awesome and they're really fun to play through, and some of the boss mechanics just get more and more like aggressive and really, really cool in the way that it presents itself. But overall, oftentimes in MMOs, you don't get to go back to these little things. Well, this allows you to do it, and there's enough of them that it's varied enough that you're not like, oh, this one again. Well, at least at this point in the game for me, I'm not getting that. And it's really cool to be able to go back to them and just have it scale to where you're at. It's really fun. But then you also have regions, which are like open zones, and they have like a whole quest line that takes you through the region, and you get to, see the story. And like I said, the main story tends to pull you through these regions as you go, and the higher prestige you get, the more of these regions and adventures you unlock. But with the regions, if you finish a region, you can also go back to that region and do it again. So say you had like a lower prestige friend who is playing, and you're not really getting any rewards for doing the adventures with them necessarily because you're so high prestige and it's at their level. But what you can do is you can go back to these zones and you can recomplete the quests. That may seem kind of grindy at first, but what it does is it gives you a ton of sparks of replication, which then increase the amount of sparks that you're getting when you go back to doing your stuff, which is pretty cool. It's actually a really good way to farm sparks of replication if you're not able to get them otherwise. So what ends up happening is you have this entire system, the prestige system, the adventures and dungeons, whatever you want to call them. There's group content there too, and kind of the same idea, which are giving you rewards, and the rewards for those dungeons and whatnot they're flipping over like every hour, so you're getting different rewards for doing them. So maybe you really needed green sparks of replication, but you didn't really want to do the one adventure that allows you to get those sparks at like a triple amount, a ×3 amount. But you saw that at the bottom, it was going to flip over in like a minute or two. Then you would wait that minute and you would see like, okay, oh, there's this other adventure that has the green sparks that I really want to do. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, just for new players, at any time on the map, if you go to the bottom right corner, when you're at like the big, like hub map, you can at any time open the thing up in the bottom right corner, it'll show all the zones and all of the adventures that you have unlocked and which ones you can go to. And that's a really easy way to get to places that seem locked out but aren't. They're just not on the map available for you to go to at the moment, either because they don't have a daily bonus or whatever the bonus is at the moment, or just because, you know, you just finished it or whatnot. So that's a good way to do that. Overall, though, the game has so much depth, and I like that. That is a good thing for MMOs to have at the moment, because it's been a constant thing over the past couple of years that MMOs are just losing their depth because they want to get new players into the game and keep them there. The way to do that is to have a game that's easy to learn. This game is not easy to learn. I see why the game needs guides for it and why I'm going to be doing that. And I think the game is fun enough at that depth level that it has, because of its depth, in fact, that's why it's fun, that people need to give it a shot. And it may take like a little bit to get into. It may take like an hour to be like, okay, I start seeing how this works. But I mean, the combat carries the game so far, and that will get you through learning the crazy deep systems of the game that just add more and more layers to it. As you play the game and as you gain prestige, you'll be noticing it feels like you're peeling back layers of the game as you like unlock the upper atlas or unlock the order system or join a pantheon, which is like a guild. And you're getting all this really cool content as far as the story is concerned, and then you're unlocking other classes to play at any given time. It's easily one of the cooler MMOs that I've seen come out in the past few years. And even if you just put a few hours into it, it's worth it, because the primary business model of the game is super fair. You know, it's not like a game that comes out of the Asian territories in the world and tends to have a completely aggressive business model, because that's what works in those territories. This game is pretty much a Russian-developed game, right? And it's launched in North America and Europe, but its business model is really fair in the fact that you can get these little crystals, and they're like their premium currency, and you can use that to get a premium account, which doubles like everything that you're getting as far as sparks, so it just kind of accelerates the game. But then what you can do is you can transfer any credits in the game that you're earning by doing stuff, like your money in the game, to this premium currency, and you could do it vice versa. So if you had premium currency but you were low on credits and you really needed credits, you can transfer it back. And it's a kind of effective way of buying in-game currency without having to go to gold sellers. But that's something you're seeing more and more in MMOs nowadays. I don't need to explain that. That makes a lot of sense to people. But it's just a really fair system. It's got a lot of depth, and it's such a cool game because it's free to play, and you could go play it right now. So I would suggest going and downloading it, giving it a try. It runs on pretty low-end computers from what we've seen. We've had a few of our guys playing it who are on like a minor vacation. They're playing on a laptop, a really bad laptop, and it's running fine for them. So it's a good-looking game, but it feels like it scales pretty well in our experience, but that may not, you know, be everyone's experience. So with that being said, though, I think there's really nothing more I could say about this game without getting super in-depth here. And we're going to save that for the guides and maybe a couple other videos to come out as I get further within the game and really explore it even further as far as like the systems are concerned and how to like min-max things, because that's what I like to do. But with that being said, we shall see you guys next time.